Hey, it's Nancy. Before we begin today, I just wanted to let you know that you can listen to Crime Beat early and ad-free on Amazon Music, included with Prime. In the early 2000s, a convicted double murderer went AWOL, gone without a trace.
Did he walk out the front gate or did he climb a fence? We don't really know.
The incident made international headlines, and a manhunt ensued. Desperate for answers in the days following the disappearance, officials from the Alberta prison even made an appeal on the popular TV show America's Most Wanted. But there was no sign of the missing inmate, sparking fear not only in the general public, but in those who had already suffered loss at his hands.
There was a lot of restless nights.
Well, he did apparently have a hit list that he left in his jail cell. The prosecutor was on it. I was on it. It was quite a lengthy list of people that he was going to get rid of.
For law enforcement, who had put the killer behind bars in the first place, it was further evidence of how clever and dangerous he was.
He's playing games with us, so, that's the kind of a bad guy he is.
I'm Nancy Hixt, a senior crime reporter for Global News. Today, on Crime Beat, I share the shocking details behind this chilling case and the murder investigation that started it all. This is Golden Years Gone. The man at the center of this story is Artie Turner. In the early 1990s, he lived in rural Alberta, in an area east of Calgary, not far from Bicycle, my hometown. I was just leaving to begin my journey into journalism in the big city, but at that time, Artie spent a lot of time in Bicycle visiting loved ones. To give you an idea of just how small the world is, while covering this case, I learned Artie was an adopted grandfather to 3 kids I grew up with. Kids I rode the school bus with every day, but when this case unfolded in the spring of 1994, we were already on different paths. Artie was just shy of his 76th birthday. He had enjoyed a long career as a railway worker with both Canadian National Rail and Canadian Pacific Rail, and had settled into retired life near the hamlet of Langdon, which was a well-known rail town named after a contractor who built the line. It's located about 30 minutes east of Calgary, and it's close to many other rural towns. In retirement, Artie kept busy and had a regular social route. He spent his days driving to visit with friends who he loved like family, including his neighbor, Len Moore.
He just liked socializing. He liked gardening, he liked socializing, and BSing once in a while.
Len and Artie would get together regularly.
He liked card games, and he was very good at it, and cribbage.
One night in late April 1994, Artie called Len and invited him over for a drink and a round of crib. But Len had been injured earlier that week and declined the offer.
I had a heifer calving out back, and she was having trouble, and that was the Thursday night. I had to get the Strathmore vet out. She did a cesarean on the heifer, and we got the calf out. And in the meantime, the heifer got her leg out and kicked me right in the thigh. And I was kind of lame, and the vet never left till 4 o'clock in the morning. And I was supposed to work early in the morning, 6 o'clock, and it was like 2 hours, and I could hardly walk. So I phoned in and said, I'll be back Saturday because I need a day off. And so Artie phoned me, and he said, well, better come on over for a game of crib. I said, I can't walk. That heifer kicked me so hard that I can't move him. I said, I'll stop in Saturday. He said, well, you got to stop because it's my daughter's birthday, her 13th birthday. And he said, well, I got a little gift for you. You got to stop and pick that up. I said, well, it won't be till Saturday. Okay. He just said, take care, kid. That's all he said.
The next day, Len headed to work early in the morning. As usual, he drove past Artie's house. But on this day, something caught his eye.
His car was gone. And I thought, well, sometimes, he gets up early and he goes to Hiracana. So, I tried calling him during the day a few times. I thought, well, he's not home, so.
While Artie was a social butterfly, he would generally stay in touch, and he usually didn't stay out that long. More than 14 hours later, when Len finished work, he checked in on his friend again.
And I came down and went to Artie's place and thought, geez, his car is still not here. It's, 8:15 or whatever, 8:30. His car still wasn't there, and I thought, that's kind of weird. Well, I pulled into the driveway. I thought, well, I got maybe, he probably left a note on the door if he was gone. So I get out of my truck, left my truck door open, my truck running, walk around to the house, and the porch door was closed. Very, not good, because he had a cat in there that just had a kitten, and he never closed that door.
There was no note on Artie's door. Len had a feeling something wasn't right and decided to take a look inside.
Walked inside the porch, and the inside plywood door was closed. And it was never closed, like the only door that was ever closed was the kitchen door, which had glass panes in it. So I opened that one, and then I opened the kitchen door, and there he was, laying there on the kitchen floor. I leaned in, and I knew he was gone, so it was panic. Blood everywhere. And it was, I ran past him through his living room and through his bedroom, and that's where the phone was. That's when I tried to call the police. It was a rotary phone, so I don't know what I did. I finally got a hold of the police, and I couldn't talk, and I dropped the phone 16 times. Anyways, the lady said, hang on, stay on the phone. I said, I got to get out of here.
Within just minutes, first responders from the nearby rural RCMP detachment arrived at Artie's home.
And he said, you sure Artie just didn't fall down, bang his head? I said something to him that I shouldn't have said, but I said something about effing kidding. Like, look at him. There was blood everywhere. He decided he didn't fall down. No, it wasn't an accident. You could tell, the way he was laying and the blood everywhere, it wasn't just a drop or two, there was blood running down the floor. It was pools. Yeah, it was not just an accident.
Corporal Doug Morrison is retired now, but in 1994, he was with the Calgary Major Crime Section of the RCMP, and he was the primary investigator assigned to this case.
There was obviously a situation that happened in the kitchen, and Mr. Turner was struck several times and basically went down, face first, and then was hit again, and then subsequently bled out there in the kitchen. So he was in the process of going to bed when the perpetrator showed up, struck him, and committed the murder.
By the time investigators took an initial walkthrough of the crime scene, it was already dark, making it difficult to navigate the property. Corporal Morrison said they contained the scene overnight and had the forensics team arrive the following day to videotape, photograph, and gather all potential evidence from Artie's property. In the meantime, officers focused on Artie's missing car.
His vehicle, which is a very distinctive, it was basically a GMC El Camino, and that's, in the old days, they used to make these cars, you'd see the odd one around. It was a passenger car on a passenger frame, but the back of the frame was basically open, and you could haul materials. So it was kind of like a miniature pickup, but only in a car chassis. So, and it was apparently mustard colored and brown. So they had a two-tone color of this vehicle. So it would be very distinct, especially in those days, because there weren't many of those vehicles around. Lo and behold, very quickly we find out that the vehicle has been located.
Artie's El Camino had been spotted by a security guard at a commercial business district in southeast Calgary, about 30 kilometers from Artie's home.
Well, it was found at 2 o'clock in the morning on the 30th, so that's probably some 4 hours after the murder was committed. And the vehicle was located, and CPS looked at the vehicle, but it hadn't been reported stolen at this time. It was just parked in a very suspicious area.
But by the time RCMP went to the area on May 1st, Artie's El Camino was gone. Whoever had stolen it was on the move, and police were steps behind.
We see the vehicle is sighted a couple of times. One on Glenmore Trail by a farmer sees the vehicle going, knowing what Artie Turner drives. He said, geez, that's Artie, but Jesus, look at the way it's going. A male driver is driving this vehicle at a high rate of speed on Glenmore Trail. So a farmer's out working his fields, probably seeding, and then looks and sees this vehicle, which is Artie's, and said, holy Christ, look at that thing go.
As investigators followed the trail of Artie's car, an autopsy revealed he had been struck on the head at least 14 times with a rod-shaped implement.
It was a blunt force, just what he was struck with. And then there was a couple of marks on the glass door, the third door. There was a couple from swinging. He had obviously hit the door a couple of times with this weapon.
The evidence also showed Artie had put up a fight. The medical examiner found multiple lacerations on the back of his forearms, which he said were consistent with Artie putting up his arms to defend himself from the onslaught of blows to his head. Police were never able to find the murder weapon. Corporal Morrison said they retraced Artie's final days to find out who he saw and who he talked to. Officers quickly realized there were a lot of people to interview because he was such a social person.
Most of the information that we gathered, during the investigation was Artie was kind of like a good friend to a lot of people. And he traveled around to Arikana, to Bicycur, to Langdon, to South, to Carsland, to Delmead. That whole area Artie would drop in and visit with people, have coffee. He was a great coffeer. And he would remember everybody's children's birth dates and stuff. So he was always like the uncle that maybe a lot of people never had. And so he was always traveling around to, markets and stuff like that, purchasing stuff so that he could give this stuff away to various children as he went along in his travels.
This confirmed what Len Moore had already shared, and at that time, he was still understandably in shock, and the police spoke with him multiple times.
Doug kept coming out here every day and interviewing some of my friends and stuff. And then we'd take a trip back down to the farmhouse. And it was tough, but I had to do it for Artie. They asked me to go and take a look to see if I knew what was missing. And all of Artie's prescription pills were gone. And, there was a few things that I remembered that were gone. And Artie had a lovebird, and it was still covered up. I remember that because it was always a squawky little bird. Artie's cookies. He had a special kind of cookies, and I can't remember what they were either, but I know he just got a bag, and the remainder of the bag was gone, so.
Corporal Morrison said Artie's house was modest, so there wasn't much for someone to steal.
That was a 2-story house that he was living in, and the upper floor had been sealed off because basically he lived in the bottom portion of the house, and there was no running water and there was no toilet, so he had to use an outdoor toilet. So he was living pretty bare bones kind of a thing. He had a small cot that was in like in the living room area of the house, and a table and a kitchen area, and I remember he had about a 5-gallon metal water that he used a ladle to drink water from. So that's the kind of impression that Artie got. He was kind of like an old-time soul.
As I put this episode together, I visited the property. The house is gone now, but that old outhouse is still there. I think back to 1994. While that's 30-odd years ago, it was still very unusual for a home in Alberta not to have indoor plumbing.
His rent for that residence, originally I was told it was $150, and then I was later told it was I think $200 he was paying a month for this place. And basically he was there by himself. He was a single person.
Artie Turner wasn't a wealthy man.
Well, he probably lived like a lot of people today, from check to check, from payday to payday. I think his pension from the railway was around maybe $1,200, and then he would have got Canada Pension, of course, and CPP, and probably, on a monthly basis, if it amounted to $2,000, that would be pretty well it. So.
As investigators processed the crime scene, Corporal Morrison said it appeared that whatever small amount of cash Artie had on him had been taken.
We found Artie's wallet, and it had his driver's license, and I think Alberta Health may have had his birth certificate as well, but it was just laying empty, just the wallet. And that was found I think on one of the cabinets in the dining room.
Would someone kill Artie for just a few $100? Police said that was the only clear motive they had.
Robbery would be the motive. Basically a financial motive to steal his money, knowing full well it was the end of the month and he would have cash.
Officers wanted to buy time to further the investigation. So Corporal Morrison said they didn't initially alert the media to Artie's homicide. Instead, they continued through their long list of interviews with Artie's family and friends.
They kind of brought up people that, from their dealings with Artie and knowing Artie and having associated with Artie, there was other people that they mentioned that they were suspicious of that would be likely suspects. Actually, they were just at his place about a week or 10 days before he gets murdered. And then they had gone back to Prince George, and they just mentioned the fact that, in their discussions with Artie, that, he was leery about this guy, or, Artie, like they're sitting around BSing, I guess, and have you had any issues with anybody, or, whatever. And it always comes down to that. And so he mentioned some names.
Every name provided was investigated.
We're just following any name that surfaces, gets a tip file, and then we have to work to cover off those tips. Like, where were you? Were you responsible? We can't leave something, 4 or 5 names and say, okay, well, for sure they wouldn't have done it. No, we got to interview them, so they all require an interview.
By May 3rd, 1994, 4 days after Artie was killed, the RCMP asked for the media's help. They released very limited details about the murder investigation and held back information on how Artie Turner had been killed. However, they did make a plea for help in finding Artie's missing El Camino. Before long, officers were inundated with tips.
So we started getting a whole bunch of calls that people have seen this on Deerfoot. Other people have seen it down in southeast Calgary. We're up to our eyeballs and trying to figure out, we've got people to interview. We've got witness statements to take.
Within hours, the El Camino was located in the parking lot of a Calgary shopping mall.
Well, we get it towed from there. Unfortunately, they didn't have any surveillance cameras in that parking lot area. It goes into our forensic garage, and that's when we start our forensic people start their investigation.
But all hopes of uncovering forensic evidence to push the case forward were quickly dashed. Crime scenes investigators found a fingerprint and a shoe print, but those were traced to two of Artie's close friends who he had recently spent time with. Both of those people were quickly ruled out as being involved in his death. Police said the lack of evidence in the vehicle meant the killer had likely wiped it down clean. As Artie's homicide topped local news, it also became the talk of the town in rural Alberta. You have to remember, it was the early 90s. Artie's neighbor Len Moore said before this happened, people were generally trusting.
We never locked our doors ever. After that, everything. Cars, doors, equipment.
It was hard for Len to believe anyone would harm such a kind-spirited man.
Who did I think could have done it? I said, I have no idea. Artie never had any enemies. He was a friendly guy.
During that interview, Len told investigators that a strange, eerie feeling came over him. He said the same thing happened when he recounted the story to me.
And I had this is no word of a lie, I had the worst shiver right from the top of my neck, right to through my spine. I blurted out, Raymond Tudor. And Bob Cop looked at me and went, what? I said, I don't know why I said that. It was just like Artie was, he always liked to poke you, I just, that's what it felt like.
Len sat there in disbelief that he had blurted out a name to officers. Raymond Tudor wasn't someone that Len knew personally. He had seen him once or twice, but really he knew of him and his reputation.
Well, he got into trouble with the law. He wasn't a fan favorite by any means, but he was I guess he's a sketchy person. Is that okay to say?
Len said Artie had complained that Raymond hit him up for money on more than one occasion, and Artie had refused.
Artie had said that Raymond was a bad actor, and the less I knew about Raymond, the better I felt.
Corporal Morrison said they added the name to their list.
Well, at that time, I don't know a heck of a lot about him other than the name has been mentioned to us. We do know that, he was born and raised in Carsland. He lives in Calgary now. He just got out of jail in February of '94 for a bunch of property crimes. Everybody was leery of Raymond John Tudor. He's one of those guys that you grew up with and didn't really want to know.
As police dug into Raymond Tudor's background, they realized he lived very close to where Artie's El Camino had been spotted just hours after the murder.
He was residing in the Alyth Lodge apartments, which were some about 400 yards to the north, so he could look out his window and see the vehicle.
The Alyth Lodge is located in the southeast Calgary community of Ogden. It had been a hotel, then an apartment building, and the original building still stands. It's since been taken over by a foundation that provides affordable housing for single men. But back in the 90s, it had quite a reputation. There's one newspaper article that referred to it as a urine-soaked, bug-infested dump. And it was a spot that police often responded to for reports of illicit activity. And given Raymond Tudor's history with the law and the sighting of Artie's car near the apartment, Corporal Morrison said Tudor quickly became a person of interest.
So we ended up bringing him into the office very early, I think probably about the 3rd or 4th of May, and interviewed him there.
That interview was audio recorded, but the quality is really poor, so I'll paraphrase a lot of what was said. Very early on in the conversation, Raymond Tudor told officers he was shocked by Artie's murder. He asked if police had any leads, and investigators said they'd been talking to anyone who knew him, but so far, they'd come up empty.
Raymond, I tell you, we're stumbling. You don't have anything at all to help us.
Tudor, for his part, admitted he'd known Artie for years because his dad had worked with him on the railway.
When's the last time you were on? Well, it'd be probably being there about a month and a half ago.
As the interview continued, the officer pushed and inquired if Tudor was responsible for Artie's death.
So I have nothing to hide. Okay. I kind of resent being asked the question. Well, Artie was a good friend of mine.
And of course, he gave us a denial statement saying, no, that he had gone up to the Blackfoot truck stop, had dinner there, and did some laundry there, and then came back, and he was at the Aelith Lodge the rest of the evening. So he wasn't responsible for this.
Corporal Morrison said they didn't tell Tudor that the El Camino had been spotted near his apartment hours after Artie's murder. Other than that detail, which could have been a coincidence, officers had no evidence linking him to the homicide. So after the interview, Raymond Tudor was free to go. Weeks went by, and investigators struggled to push the case forward.
It does slow down because now we've interviewed everybody that we know that it's attached to that file. We don't have any DNA evidence. We don't have the weapon that was used to kill Artie.
Then, out of the blue, Len Moore received a strange phone call from an unidentified man.
He asked me all the information about how Artie was murdered. Was he stabbed or was he, shot and he said, if you give me any of that information, he said, I might know the person that did it. I thought it was totally crazy. It was not. Why would somebody phone you at work and ask you? And if you knew the person that did the murdering, turn them in.
The RCMP received a similar anonymous tip.
The guy just phones and asks, listen, I hear there was a murder out in Langdon. Was the guy shot?
Artie Turner had been bludgeoned to death, but you'll recall the RCMP had never made that information public.
We know that there's somebody out there that wants to talk to us, but probably scared for himself, and we just got to find that guy.
But despite the tips and tireless work by investigators, more than a year passed with no arrests. Raymond Tudor was still considered a suspect, but a lack of evidence meant he continued to walk free.
We didn't have enough to charge the guy or convict him. So, it's no use us taking a run at a guy, get him into court, and then we lose it, and then we can never charge him again. So we wait until we have the evidence, and then we spring.
And so the case went cold. Months passed until another shocking crime unfolded. A beloved grandfather disappeared from his home in Calgary under very suspicious circumstances.
You don't know what to think. You don't want to believe that something's wrong, but there were things that I knew were wrong. I didn't know whether he was taken, whether he was still alive, whether he was laying somewhere injured. You don't know, right?
Was it all an eerie coincidence, or did this senior meet a similar fate as Artie?
We know something bad, probably bad, has happened. We certainly know there's a significant amount of blood, not only in the victim's car, but in the victim's house. We know that there's some drag marks. We know that, a wallet is found with somebody else. We know that a couple of handguns and some long guns that belonged to the victim were taken by the driver and given to yet another individual, this witness. So clearly something is going on. We're just not exactly sure what we have yet.
That's next time on Crime Beat. Crime Beat is written and produced by me, Nancy Hixt, with senior producer Dila Velasquez. Audio editing and sound design is by Rob Johnston. Special thanks to photographer-editor Danny Lantella for his work on this episode. And thanks to Chris Bassett, the VP of Network Content Production and Distribution and Editorial Standards for Global News. I would love to have you tell a friend about this podcast. There are 7 seasons of stories you can listen to and share. And please consider rating and reviewing Crime Beat on Apple Podcasts or wherever you listen. You can find me on Facebook at Nancy Hixt Crime Beat and on Instagram at nancy.hixt. That's Hixt. Thanks again for listening. Please join me next time.